Thank you, John. Thanks very much for those comments. I would like to encourage everyone to use the Q&A chat to address your questions or comments to John and throughout the day to all speakers and panelists. The event hosts and panel chairs will moderate out your questions during the discussion periods. So, John, we have one question that I would like from the audience that I would like to share with you. So why aren't risk models used perhaps every 5 years to audit whether progress is being made in risk reduction by measuring and reporting expected economic damages and casualties?
That's a great question. I actually think that and have suggested that this is an area that we ought to be striving to be able to do. But I think and I think to a limited extent we can do so where there's a very good data and where we have, we're able to clearly monitor progress in other ways, because the models themselves and with the data that we have, I think over short time periods, it's quite difficult to do that. I think we can monitor things like changes in building stock. We can look at earthquakes, say that are happening historically. We can compare over different timescales in different countries. So I think we're getting to a point where this is becoming more possible. But I actually think models not only for earthquakes but for other hazards, as we evolve our capabilities, as we get better at measuring risk and collecting the data, not only in advance of assessing risk, but also from damage data from events, that we will be able to use modeling tools together with observations to do exactly that.
Thank you. So another question. So GEM has a global database of exposure for residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. You mentioned that. This database is one of the fundamental inputs for your global earthquake risk model. So how might this database be used in other applications, such as for the risk assessments or for other hazards, or in maybe post-disaster impact assessments?
Okay, thanks for the question, Bill. I think it's one of the things that we think is very important for work that GEM is doing that can be applied in many other applications, and not only in natural hazards, but certainly the climate change world, and also in things that looking at energy efficiency. Having fundamental information about buildings is something that goes well beyond the GEM's mandate, but I think it's something that can contribute and should be further developed. So we use data, for instance, from national censuses. We use OpenStreetMap. We use satellite remote sensing. We look at economic data on construction practices and prices. We've done a lot of work on to understand building typologies, so we can assign structural classes and so forth. So this information then can be very useful in a lot of applications. It's something that I think, in combination with some of the work that the USGS did in the recent earthquake in Turkey and Syria, the USGS provides excellent data on the impact, and we've taken that information and also tried to look at from the modeling at the impact of the earthquake on the on the local communities. And I would say, again, with additional observational data, this sort of approach could become much more useful and applied in a much more I guess more effectively in a response mode. If we had good data, if we had good local data on buildings, and we can assist the process by better understanding where damage is likely to have occurred and where response crews can can most effectively apply the resources.
Oh, very good, thanks. We have a few questions coming in related to potential collaboration with your institute. And I'll just kind of, I guess, group them into a general question. If folks are interested in that, how might they go about it? Do they contact you, or are there other approaches?
Yeah, I mean, we get interest from organizations in lots of different ways. So I think initially there were a number of institutions that joined us as sponsors and have benefited from collaborating with us for years. But we also, through small grants or even through just working with the in-house capability and resources we've assisted governments with developing, for instance, national hazard maps. The work with the Philippines was done completely ad hoc without additional funding. But I think if an organization comes to us with an interest in working together, we can also host staff for trainings. We can do online seminars. So I would say, yes, approach me or approach one of the, even go through our information email, and we'd be very happy to discuss ways that we could work together.
So related to that, I think you've touched on this a good bit in your responses, but your presentation talked about a few different examples of national governments or geological survey organizations working with GEM to develop their own hazard maps. How can other organizations become more involved with GEM or seek assistance in developing their own capability to that end?
Well, I guess the answer would be similar. Our software is free and open. I think sometimes the barrier is having enough of a technical interface that an organization can meaningfully work with the data. But we're also developing products now that can be used by, you might say, non-experts, risk models and hazard models that are used by a whole range of organizations for doing initial assessments of hazard or risk. So it's hard to characterize the best way, but I think if organizations are interested in having more information about us, check in with our newsletter, send a note, say you're more interested in join the OpenQuake users forum if you've got OpenQuake analysis interests or needs. Check out the global hazard and risk maps that are online, and feel free to send in your questions or comments.
Excellent, thank you. So we have a question that has come in referring to part one of the session and your talk, and so I'm going to do my best to translate or to cite this question. Apologize if I don't quite get it right. But so although briefly mentioned in part one, why isn't this disaster risk reduction effort more closely aligned with FEMA, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Defense in the U.S. As a U.S. example of those agencies for each disaster type? So that would be tsunamis, earthquakes, flooding, dam safety, etc., or loss in infrastructure and life monetarily. Of course, you don't cover all of those multi-hazards, but from your perspective, a response to that question?
Oh, why we don't do more for other hazards?
I think it is more about the loss in infrastructure in life monetarily. So could you clear up how you address that?
Oh, how we assess loss?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, the risk models are taking normally public information about buildings and infrastructure, also population, and we use of course empirical data that's available from post-disaster assessments. We use model data from publications, and we also do our own modeling analysis, engineering, computer-based analyses of building structures to make assessments of the vulnerability. So that information is then involved with the hazard information. So we come up with, for if there's enough information about any structure, we can provide an estimate of the potential loss in any given earthquake. That information is, well, we don't generally provide information about specific structures. We are actually doing some work with the U.S. government doing exactly that, but normally the public information is not site specific, but there are organizations that come to us and ask about assessments for specific structures. But I mean, the process of risk analysis for earthquake and the work that's done in USGS or in the US by USGS, by the Army Corps, et cetera, it's just, I think, the same methodology, probabilistic hazard and risk-based analysis, which is fairly, I think, a fairly standard methodology for all of us for those applications.